Welcome to Mach-E GT, my Mach-E and electric vehicle enthusiasts channel. Today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about why where I live, Long Island, New York, is an excellent place for EV ownership. To situate you where Long Island is, for those that may not know, Long Island is in New York State on the east coast of the United States. It is, in fact, a long island, more than 100 miles long, much longer than it's wide. It begins across the East River from Manhattan. In fact, the boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens are geographically on Long Island, and continues eastward with the counties of Nassau and Suffolk, and goes way the heck out there. It's between the Atlantic Ocean to the south and Long Island Sound to the north. Actually, the Atlantic Ocean's also to the east. And that's where I live. So why is it such a great place for EVs? Well, let's talk about the challenges that EVs and EV owners face. So one is climate. As we know, particularly as many people see in the wintertime, the range and battery performance for an electric vehicle suffers greatly when the temperature drops. But as you may see in the summer, actually in very high temperatures, battery performance can suffer, battery chemistry can suffer if you charge without sufficient cooling. That's why when you charge, particularly at a high-speed charging station, often in the winter the car will have its heat on, and in the summertime the car may run the air conditioner just to cool the batteries. So there's a sweet spot for battery performance and electric vehicle performance, climate-wise. Then there's the kind of driving you do. The best way to get performance out of an EV, not just raw speed, but overall range, is in a mix of driving. The mixture of, say, highway speeds and local traffic. And if you have regeneration from your braking, as most EVs do, being able to, if you're in stop and go traffic, you actually get back a lot of power that feeds back into your battery. That's how regular hybrid cars work and plug-in hybrids work after the large capacity battery is depleted, and it's certainly how EVs extend their range through regen. You also are better off driving on flat surfaces than on large hills. It's not to say EVs can't do hills. They absolutely can, and I'm not claiming that any of these is a stopper for EV ownership, but the reality is that EVs are heavy by virtue of the battery, and the more weight that the car has to lug up a mountain, the more it's going to drain the battery. So you are better, and even though on the way back down the mountain you might get a fair amount of that back through regeneration, you're still going to use more going up than you gain going down. So you get the most range on flat surfaces, and you get the most range doing a mix of driving. And then there's the question of charging. The biggest concern that a lot of EV owners, prospective EV owners, have is where they are going to charge their cars. And if you live in an apartment building where you may have a parking garage, or even worse, you don't have any street parking or dedicated parking where you have a charger, then the only places you may be able to charge are public chargers, either at a workplace or worse and more expensively at pay-per-use public chargers, assuming there are those on your route. It's very expensive, depending on how much the public charging facility costs. It can actually be more expensive per mile than gasoline, although it's rarely true. It still could be very expensive, unless you are fortunate enough to have free of charge charging. Old school Teslas, some Hyundais, Kias, and Volkswagens, but most of us have to pay if we go. So you are better off from an economics point of view if you can charge at home as much as possible. You also want to be able to get service for your EV and ideally have a choice of EVs to buy if you're in the market. Not everywhere in the United States has a complete offering of EVs. In fact, some models are only for sale in some states. And service offerings may be sparser when in states where you don't have as many EVs. Okay, so that's sort of the overall challenges that are common to EV owners. So why Long Island, of all places? Well, start with the temperature. As we said, Long Island is not only an island, but between two large bodies of water. What that means is our weather here is actually fairly moderate. It's not that we're always warm, certainly not. But when compared to even neighboring states like New Jersey, our winters are typically milder. We get less snow and the cold isn't quite as bad. And conversely, our summers are typically somewhat less hot. Not a tremendous amount, but the presence of those two bodies of water does a really good job of moderating our climate. So the highs and lows between which we live on Long Island are actually, pretty close, particularly on the high side, to the sweet spot for EV batteries. Next is the kind of roads we have. So Long Island is covered with roads. It has 3 major east-west highways that cover a good percentage of the distance from east to west, southern and northern state parkways, and the Long Island Expressway pretty much down the middle. And there are plenty of north-south roads to connect between them. And then there are lots of other roads. Island is covered with roads. Good or bad, it's true. And what that means is you could typically get anywhere you want to on Long Island by car. It may take longer if there's traffic, but you will get there. There will be a way to get there. But there is traffic, so you will have that mix of city driving or local driving and highway driving and traffic. All good for maximizing range. The other nice thing about the number of highways is that many of the EV self-driving or driver's assistance systems, the hands-free ones in particular, are limited to previously mapped divided highways. And it turns out that on Long Island, our major arteries are on those lists, with Ford's Blue Cruise in particular, with which I am very familiar. The roads I travel every day are mapped and part of Blue Cruise. And if I turn on adaptive cruise control and lane change assistance, which are the two things that you have to turn on to activate Blue Cruise, almost invariably, very quickly, I will have Blue Cruise available for my drive. And there aren't too many major curves either where Blue Cruise may disengage. So it's not so much for long, fast stretches, but for the frequent traffic on those highways, Blue Cruise is a wonderful thing. And I think that some of the other systems like that in the Nissan Ariya, from what I understand, and others are also based on mapping. So the fact that so many of our roads that we will travel are mapped divided highways means we get to use those systems like Blue Cruise a lot. Then there's charging. So, first of all, range. Long Island is long, and it is more than 100 miles. But almost any destination on the island can be got to in a round trip from anywhere else on the island within the range of pretty much every mainstream EV on the out there. So you're talking 200 miles in the wintertime, not a problem. And for that matter, we are within that range for much of the New York City metropolitan area. So if I'm going into New York City, into northern New Jersey, even as far as Philadelphia, or up into Westchester County in New York, I typically can get there and back and all around on a full charge without having to worry about public charging. In fact, in just over 7,000 miles of EV driving since July of 2022, so you're talking 8-ish months, 8 or 9 months, I have not had to charge at a public charging station once. I've done one high speed for 1 kilowatt hour to make sure it works. And when I went fishing, I plugged in at a level 2 because I could, and it was free of charge. But I didn't need to. So people ask me, of course, how long does it take your car to charge? I don't know. I do it overnight. And it's always plenty for a day's worth of driving. And I'm not unique in that. Long Island is suburbs. It is covered with suburbs. It has been for pretty much the last 100 plus years, and very much so since the end of World War II. And those suburbs were designed for people with cars. Many of them, in fact, are not particularly walkable. My town happens to be. People need cars to get pretty much everywhere they have to go. There are some buses, but not many and not in every place. And there are trains, but you typically have to drive to get to the train. So the housing on Long Island is designed for people with cars. Many, many private homes of all sizes. Not that they're all so large, but even small ones typically have a driveway where you can either plug into a 110 outlet for slower overnight charging, or mount, as I have, a level 2 charger on your driveway or in your garage to charge your car. And even apartments typically have parking, places where either they have electric service or the building owner can put it in, and the residents will have cars. So we really have a very common chance to charge our cars at home. Not everyone, obviously, but most of us have a place to park our cars from which we can charge. For that matter, if we do need public charging, Long Island is populated enough, and with enough places like shopping centers that are prime locations, that both Tesla and companies like Electrify America have put in and are putting in more and more locations for high-speed public charging. It's not a rarity. If I wanted to go all the way out to Montauk Point, which is 100 plus miles, that's in fact the end of Long Island, if I want to go do that, I probably can make it, certainly in the summertime, round trip on a full charge of my car. But I generally wouldn't need to. There are plenty of public chargers, and more every day along the way. So I can plan a trip, and if for whatever reason I am low on charge, there should be some sort of high speed, or at the very least level 2 charger nearby that I can go and get it. I don't have to worry that I'm going to be stuck out on my errands not being able to charge. It's a really nice thing. So Long Island is really well suited for EVs, and the evidence suggests that people are noticing. The Drive Electric Long Island Coalition, with which I'm involved, recently reported on a study of auto registrations, new car registrations in New York State in the second half of 2022. And what was notable first about that study was how many, I mean, obviously not a huge percentage of the total, but how many electric cars were registered in the state of New York. It was a large number. I'll put the numbers on the screen so you can see them. But even more so, when you looked at where within the state people were buying and registering new electric cars, the two counties on Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk, were very much towards the top of that list from a county perspective. And in some particular towns and villages within those counties, the percentages of new cars that were electrified in some way, that were registered, was in the double digits. It's a significant number. Obviously, it's a fairly economically well-off area. Not everyone and not everywhere, but on average, which has something to do with it. But also, it's a reflection of the fact that Long Islanders can fill their driving needs with EVs. Mine was one of those registered in the second half of 2022, just at the beginning of that period. And while I do still have a plug-in hybrid minivan, other than one move up my daughter up to college trip and a couple of other family trips where we were putting 4 or 5 adults plus luggage in the vehicle, my van has not been used. I don't need it. For all of my driving, local, regional, my EV, my Mustang Mach-E GT, works, and works really well. And I think while there are other places in the United States and in the world where the conditions are best for EV ownership, for convenient EV ownership, where I live happily is very much one of the best. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you find this interesting. I appreciate your thoughts and comments. Not to say where you live is worse, but I would like to hear what your thoughts are. And as always, like, share, subscribe, and I look forward to posting more videos soon.